Thank you very much, Jen. And it wasn't too long ago that 10-year-olds were working in the mines in Nova Scotia, I can tell you that. I'd like to say thanks to Jen and thanks to Mayor Dad and the organizing committee. Congratulations on another successful conference and for the tenacity with which you pursue this project, so I congratulate you. Pipsc supports the Canadian Science Policy Conference because we share so many of its objectives. Like you, we want to see more attention paid to science and science policy. We want to see science play its proper role in policymaking, and we would like to see a policy for science that is appropriate for the 21st century. I welcome this opportunity to add the Institute's perspective on advancing science policy. I would like to briefly highlight some of our key concerns and put forward some suggestions for action. First, a few words about the Professional Institute. Pipsc represents close to 60,000 professionals, many of whom are scientists, researchers, regulators in government departments and agencies, in laboratories and institutes. Of course, many of our members and others who work for the federal government may be here today. Our members are biologists, chemists, medical professionals, engineers, meteorologists, and physicists, to name only a few. But whatever their training, they all serve what we call the public good. They are all on the scientific front lines protecting Canadians, preserving the environment, and contributing to the economic prosperity of Canada. Our institute has been a long-standing commitment to advocating for public science. Over the past 30 years, we have issued reports and intervened in public debates, and more recently convened 2 major science symposiums ourselves, one in 2007 and one in 2010. And most recently, we launched a public website called publicscience.ca. We believe, and I'm sure that you will agree, that our members' daily work, Science for the Public Good, is an essential piece of the S&T fabric. It is generally accepted, at least in theory if not always in practice, that scientific achievement in this country rests on 3 independent but highly interdependent pillars: the private sector, universities, and government. The private sector has an important and often cutting-edge resources to contribute, but it needs facilities that require coordinated large-scale capacity for much of R&D. And of course, the private sector focuses on maximizing return on investment and does not necessarily correspond to meeting the most critical needs of Canadians and their communities. Universities also play an essential role in nurturing development and developing scientific talent, and universities' research is often pioneering. But their mandate does not include long-term research or may not respond to urgent needs. The third pillar of Canadian science is government science, or what we like to call public science. It is science whose only driver is the public good. It informs regulatory and policy decisions and produces public good products, such as standards and services. It enables and ensures the ability to anticipate and respond quickly to adverse events. And it supports R&D and innovation in the private sector and in universities to improve the economic and social well-being of all Canadians. We are living in challenging times. Times when it's most important to get policy, and more specifically, science policy, right. As the world grapples with the worst economic crisis in generations, governments are making important decisions on how to invest public resources. Our federal government is targeting another $6 billion in cuts from departments and agencies, while at the same time handing out $14 billion in across-the-board tax breaks to corporations. Meanwhile, the International Energy Agency warns that we are at the tipping point of catastrophic climate change. And a new draft report from the Ipcc suggests that global warming will create weather on steroids, with fierce heat waves, unprecedented droughts, and devastating storm surges. At the very same time, our federal government is taking another step to downgrade climate science by dismantling Canada's world-leading contribution to ozone science. Globalization has brought with it not only more complexity and greater challenge, but also more threats and greater risks to our prosperity, to our environment, and to our health and safety. We are at a critical moment. Today's policy decisions will impact the course of human history. This is a time for foresight. We must be prepared to meet these challenges. This is a time when we need the three solid and mutual supporting pillars for science in Canada: industry, university, and government. With these in place, Canada can lead the world. When it comes to science, Canadians are rightfully proud of our achievements. For decades, our government scientists have made huge contributions to public good, both in Canada and around the world. There are many, many examples, like the development of so many high quality wheat cultivars, to just name only a few, and I could go on. But most of these stories will go unheard. And unfortunately today, our capacity to contribute has already been greatly reduced by short-sighted fiscal policy. Another aspect of public science that is not well understood beyond these walls is the extent to which collaboration and cooperation is built into the DNA of government scientists. We should be well-placed to contribute to a conference with the theme of building bridges. The problem is that it is becoming difficult to associate the concept of building with what has been happening in government science in recent times and to varying degrees over the last 30 years. The fact is, intramural R&D in the federal government has been plummeting from 30% of total Canadian R&D in 1970 to 9% in 2007. And the ratio of government R&D to GDP is now, unfortunately, below OECD average. Yet, while tremendous time and attention is dedicated to understanding the underperformance of Canadian business R&D, these equally concerning statistics have attracted little concern. Obviously, all of the panels, studies, and reports on business R&D are justified given its poor performance despite large investments of taxpayer dollars. But why does government R&D only enter into the picture as an afterthought or as a means of improving business R&D? Doesn't government research have its own intrinsic value? Isn't it critical for some of government's core functions like regulation and policy making? Isn't it critical for that? Above and beyond the inherent importance of these functions, we know that a world-class regulatory system based on sound science ensures health and environmental standards and supports commercial innovation. We also know that basic research produces the knowledge necessary for responsible policymaking and provides the foundation for setting national standards. This brings me to a recommendation. The Professional Institute has repeatedly stated that investment in government research must be brought up to at least the OECD average. But we obviously haven't made much headway. So maybe it's time for a new approach. Maybe it's time for a blue ribbon panel to take a look at government R&D, not as an afterthought, but as a core mandate. While I hesitate to suggest another panel at a time when action is needed, we do need to shine a spotlight on the public pillar of Canadian science. This is particularly true as the public science now faces a new and serious threat. It is a toxic mix of increasing disdain for evidence-based decision-making and a disappearing commitment to transparency. While the long-form census stands out as symbolic, a raft of decisions and actions underline the apparent preference for ideology over evidence and the lack of respect for scientific knowledge. We have seen the systematic elimination of tools that provide solid evidence and a failure to implement real transparency in government science. It is difficult to believe that these developments are not related. All this leaves government scientists caught between a rock and a hard place. Their ability to do their job is compromised by a working environment where resources are drying up, by a lack of support by their employer, and by their inability to communicate the importance of what they do. I would like to propose two simple steps that will contribute to getting public science back on track. Why not reinstate the Office of the National Science Advisor? I'm so sure Professor Chubb would be willing to second this suggestion. If it works in Australia, the United States, and a host of other jurisdictions, well, it should work in Canada. In fact, it once did. And who better to lead a high-level panel and review the statement of the state of government science? How about implementing real whistleblower protection? 18 years after it was first promised in an election campaign, there is still nothing worthy of a name in this country. Doesn't the public good demand that? Above all else, we need a federal government that demonstrates its commitment to sound science. We need a government that is ready to develop the knowledge and foresight that Canada and the world desperately need to meet the challenges of the 21st century. Last but not least, we need a government that will ensure that all three pillars of Canadian science are healthy so that we can build bridges between us that stand the test of time.